Hey everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of Educational Lounge. I'm Heartless. With me is, on that side, CavalierGuest, and next to him we have QuackNiix, ex Roll20 Sports, ex Fnatic, not ex streamer. Actually, a pretty good streamer right nowadays, huh, Quacks? You've been rolling those numbers.
Yep, it has been going pretty good ever since I made the decision of trying out full-time streaming, so I'm very happy about that.
I'm personally happy that you're still in the scene, man. Kind of sad that you're not in the pro, but as long as you're still playing the game, I'm really happy because, uh, admittedly, I'm kind of on a small hiatus from Heroes of the Storm at the moment. But when I was playing, I was about mid-masters, so I got to play with a lot of pros. So, granted, while they were climbing up, but I got to play with a lot of pros. You're no exception, and you're by far, man, by far the nicest that I've ever played with. It was such a treat, and you've earned a fan probably for life just from our encounters in Hero League. So I'm really glad you're here, man.
Yeah, well, thank you, and I'm happy to be here. I really like doing these things because I think like a lot of pros don't usually do these things, right? Like, okay, I'm not a pro anymore, but you get what I'm saying.
You're
I
a
think,
pro in our hearts. You're still here.
fair enough. I just think it's really, really good, and it's like I really try to take advantage of the position I have, and try to be idol or whatever you want to call it, or like somebody who can actually reach out for the community, as the community has done so much for me. But most pro players just want to play the game and get money.
Well, I'm for one happy that you're still here with us, man. And you know what? Out of all the players that we've got to have in Heroes of the Storm since its inception, I think you're one of those that actually got to make his own name and stood up above everyone else, notably because of your drafting skills. I think Cav can agree with me, or that's actually this side. Cav can agree with me when I'm saying that you're probably one of the best drafters the game has ever seen. So I'm really excited to have you here with us talking about drafting. Gonna pick your brain a bit and of course answer viewers' questions at the end. So gonna be a big treat for all of us. Cav, QuackNiix, let's begin. QuackNiix, me and Cav have done an episode in the past about drafting. And one of the things we kind of started talking about, and I would like to have your answer too, is how important drafting actually is in this game. Because we have seen, pro players from all spectrum here saying either the drafting doesn't matter or the drafting is too important, actually. Like, it's too much, it has too much of a weight in the game itself. Maybe you can give us kind of a general idea, at least from your point of view as a drafter, how impactful is drafting in this game? How important is it?
Yeah, for sure. The way I see it is that like the draftings in general in this game, especially talking competitive, has like, I don't know, it's literally 50% of the game in my opinion, or it was at least at our prime in Fnatic. I think it was the most important thing, and like a core reason to why we were doing so good, because I think, I don't know, like, it's like you can say that it matters too much in this game, but then again, right, if that's just how the game is, then you just gotta adapt, then you gotta figure out how to draft, because the drafting is just part of the game. Like, you can't rely on just playing or being like mechanically good, because it has such a big impact. So teams would just have to get good and learn how to draft, and so on. And I think I personally, since it was my strength as well as game sense, like I always liked it, but I do understand people that think drafting has too big of an impact, because as I said, like for me, it's like pretty much has always been literally like 50% of the game.
Yeah, and I guess having this mindset actually led you to become one of the more notable drafters in the game's history. So that's good. So you're actually saying that drafting is actually very important, and you should never underestimate it. Cav, kind of to reiterate what we talked about in our drafting episode, do you agree?
I mean, I agree that drafting is really important, and you can actually, like, it's not ideal, but there are actually situations where you can like win or lose the game in the draft, and it gets to the point where you have a draft. If you execute it, the enemy team doesn't have tools to deal with it. You're just going to win. So it's not the only thing, but it's kind of like macro. If you don't do it to a certain minimum level, you're just automatically going to lose.
That's something I actually wanted to touch on as well, where I think drafting and game sense goes very hand in hand, because while you're drafting, like you're literally thinking about how you want to play the game and how the game is gonna play it out. So you're 5 steps ahead already when you're drafting, because you're thinking how you want to play the game, how you're gonna approach, your rotations, and how you get an advantage and actually play the games themselves. So just as Cav said, like there's gonna be a lot of games, especially thinking at the competitive level, where people play a decent macro and people actually know what to do with the heroes and the composition they're drafting, that you can just win games off of the tools you have, and the enemy team can't do anything if you just play your draft like flawless.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The draft, that actually the drafting has such an impact in the game, which kind of brings me to the next point. Throughout the show, Quacks, just to give you a bit background, throughout our educational show, we always try to address both the Hero League aspect of the game for people who, for the viewers that are actually more of a solo players, and also the competitive one, because after all, we are coming from Heroes Lounge, and this is where you have a lot of amateur teams, and let me tell you something, a decent amount of them aspire to become more than just amateurs. We have a good amount of players that are actually participating in Open Division and are aspiring to be part of HGC in the future if they'll be good enough. So we always try to address both those communities, if you will, the Hero League ones and the competitive one. So drafting, how does it differentiate? Because now you're playing almost exclusively Hero League, right? As opposed to in the past where you did a lot of competitive too. How does drafting actually change between those two modes from your point of view? Because again, you are the mastermind of drafting in EU for the most part. How does it differentiate? Like how do you see it? Like Hero League versus competitive?
Yeah, like perfect. Personally, I'm really bad at Hero League because I try to play the game at a high level. Meaning like I don't rely on micro, aka mechanics, to win the games, because I try to think above that and actually try to play smart and try to play optimally. Meaning, like in Hero League, people usually go take a 5 versus 5 fight that is completely unnecessary when you should just be setting up camps or pushing out waves and whatnot. And it goes the same for drafting, where it's like it's impossible to draft like properly in Hero League, and it's very unpredictable because people just tend to pick what they like, And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, because you're not playing competitive. However, I think drafting in Hero League can matter a lot, but at the same time, since you're not playing your drafts like optimally regardless, right? Because it's solo queue.
Yeah.
You can win with any draft. Like you can literally pick Probius Gaslow and you just win anyways because you played good and the other team didn't play very good. And then there's gonna be those games where you have the Gaslow Probius and then the enemy team has a full meta comp and you can't do anything because they're actually playing decent. So I think it changes a lot from competitive to Hero League because it's very, as much as drafts have such a big impact, it's very unreliable in solo queue, as I just mentioned, because you're not actually gonna play to the strengths or the power spikes or, like how to actually play the drafts, if it makes sense. So somebody can just pick Gaslow, get the 3-man grab bomb, and win the game anyways.
That's actually a really good point what you just said. And I guess this is part of why some people underestimate draft, because they're coming with a lot of experience from Hero League and they see exactly what you're talking about. They see Gaslow, Nova winning games, a Butcher winning games, and then you go to HGC and you don't see those heroes for a reason, and so they get the notion that actually drafting doesn't matter at all. Whereas the truth is, it doesn't matter in Hero League; it matters in competitive. Cav, what would you say from your point of view, the drafting between Hero League and competitive as well? Because we've talked about most of those stuff in our previous episode, and I would like to kind of bring our point of view again to the front.
I actually thought of a good analogy for this the other day, which is that it doesn't matter if you draft a hammer if you're not actually going to put any nails in. And I think that's just the way you summarize Hero League. People, even if they draft a hero, they may not be good at it. They may not play that hero optimally. You have Janas that don't clear waves. You have Mathaels that don't do bruiser camps. You have Samuros that don't go Illusion Master and move around the map. You have Dahakas that don't use their global at all. And then they don't have the map awareness to oh, we're invading, I should burrow in. So in Hero League, like you're not going to get optimal execution from your team, and that makes drafting matter a lot less, because even if you're drafting the right tools, you're not doing them using them the right way. It can be kind of a clown fiesta, which is what everyone in EU calls it.
Yeah, sorry about the shoe on head, but people accuse me in chat of this being pre-recorded. It's not. It's actually for the first time. It's gonna be live. Just for reference, QuackNiix, we did episodes with Ishbu and Michael Udall in the past, and because of the time zones and their schedule, it had to be pre-recorded. So you're the first EU guest we have, and thankfully you can also make it in time. So this is actually live, and I had to put the shoe on head. Anyway, moving on. So the next question that kind of brings me in then, for kind of people who are starting to dab a little bit with drafting, is what would be the current pick orders for drafts? Generally speaking, because we're gonna go in depth with that later on. If you can answer, if you say that we need to go in depth in order to answer that Quacks, then that's fine by me. We can go, because I know that drafting can be very complicated. The pick orders, and it might not be as straightforward. So if you can kind of give us like a general answer, if possible. If not,
like I'm like that with pretty much anything though. That I cannot just give a general answer like that, because especially when it comes to drafting in game sense, like I think it's too in depth and too situational. But to make it simple, like there's certain metas, right, where some heroes are very dominant, and there's just like 3 heroes on some specific role that are the meta champs. So like to make it simple, we have. For a very long time, there was pretty much like Yrel, the Haka, Blaze were the only 3 side laners played. So if one team first picks Yrel, like you have to pick the other tank in your 1-2, because if you don't, then they can ban one of them and force you on the third. That might not be good or whatever, right? And it also gives away nothing, because pretty much 9 out of 10 games, you're gonna want one of these 3, right? Because it's just the best heroes in the meta. Unless you have something cheesy prepared with like a secret multi or whatever. But like that's the most like general thing I could say regarding drafting, where it's like in very stale metas where there's just a few like OP picks within a certain role, you usually want to pick those early, just because it reveals nothing and it just secures you one of the best heroes in that role, and then you can still build from that, because you haven't chosen what direction you want to go with your draft just by picking like that one hero, especially side lane.
Yeah. So Cav, we kind of also talked about this, where our first picks are gonna be meta/power picks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cav, do you agree with that, or is there like a bit more in depth that needs to be taken, or something else that needs to be taken into consideration when you start drafting?
I mean, if you're drafting standard, that's absolutely right. But even if you're drafting non-standard, you don't want to give away that you're drafting non-standard in your first couple of picks. So you would still like try to build comps that have some meta heroes in them, and then be like, we're going to pick the meta heroes first, we're going to pick the off meta heroes later. And when things become meta, they start getting picked earlier. A really easy example is Octalysis with Zool. Like when they were running Zool as a main tank, they picked it last, and then as people understood that they were doing that, they started having to pick it earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier to get it, because it became meta. So pick your meta picks early.
Change it to priority in the beginning when it's hidden. Then you last pick it to not reveal anything or give them a chance to counter what you want to do. But then again, as Cav just said, like once you've played it a few times, people know that you want to run this thing, and then if you don't pick it early, you're not gonna get it.
Okay, fair enough. So we kind of starting to talk about amateur teams, or at least I mentioned amateur teams are very interested in starting to learn how to draft. And one of the things that we have seen in the past is not necessarily with drafting, but with all roles actually, or in general, is how teams approach to decision makings as a whole. And drafting, in a way, is not really an exception. What I mean by that is very simple. When you draft, there are 2 major ways to draft, as everything in the game, right? There's an approach where everyone shares their thoughts, everyone are part of the drafting, everyone are part of the shot calling too in the game. And there's the approach where one person takes control over the drafting, one person takes control of the shot calling, and so on and so forth. What is, like, in your opinion, what are the pros and cons for both styles, and what is your preferred style? Or we can start it. We can start with what is your preferred style, and then pros and cons.
So I think what is the most common, and is my preferred style as well, is that you have a main drafter and a main shot caller. But that doesn't mean that they have all the power. It just means when it comes down to it, they have the final say. So I personally, for like all the years I've been drafting and shot calling in every team I've been in, I always want everybody to be really vocal. So especially when scrimming, I try to explain why I want to pick certain picks. I give people suggestions that we're gonna be looking for this and this. So like you have the option. Okay, so we're gonna look to blow up frontline. So we have the option of going into KT, Jane, or Grayman here. What do you like? And then I want them to elaborate and say why they want X. And maybe I still say I still want this though, you know. But because that's where it comes down to me as the main shot caller or main drafter. I have the final say. But then I still want people to say, like, oh, but maybe Falstad is good here because I can do Y, you know? And then they give me an idea and I say, no, that's shit. Or I say, yeah, let's try it. It sounds good, you know? But that's the thing where when they changed the drafting, so you had 25 seconds, like you had got less time for picks, it got harder to actually have conversations regarding what you wanted to pick and so on. So it kind of became more reliant on your drafter, you know, like you don't have time to actually ask people every time what they want to pick or for them to elaborate regarding something. So it was more like then, yeah, like you scrim and you practice and you kind of have to have everything pre-planned, and then you ask quickly, like, do you want this or this, or you just dictate, like, pick this, because yeah, you just don't have the time anymore.
Yeah, it's actually a good point. How, and I don't think too many people paid attention to how reducing the time would actually affect the professional scene, especially the teams that have a lot of focus on community, or not community, but group decision making. Cav, about the pros and cons between those two styles, maybe there's something we missed you'd like to add about that?
No, I think Clark's answer was great. I think it comes down in a lot of ways to human psychology. There's always going to be disagreements to some degree about what the optimal draft is. And I think having a main drafter who has final like decision-making power and it's up to them, if they're comfortable with that responsibility, it's just better. There are teams that are like, I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to, tell people what to play. And for an amateur team, that maybe it makes it easier to get along. But in competitive, I think someone needs to be that final decision maker. And there are teams that don't have that, and sometimes they end up with like drafts that don't quite work as well as they wanted them to. It's been an issue for a lot of teams.
It's also like it comes down to a lot of trust as well, where it's like, yes, you have to have that one guy, that the main drafter that feels comfortable with the responsibility, but like the way you feel comfortable with that is by like making sure that you feel like you have the trust from your teammates, you know?
Yeah.
Because if they trust you, then they're just gonna keep making sure that, Quack, you just do what you want, we trust you, you know? And then it makes my job so much easier. And there's usually a lot of people that don't even have a say because they actually don't really understand like how drafting works, and they don't even bother trying to like learn or to like help, in the sense that they don't say anything, right? Because they don't feel that they have good input. But that's something like I've always, when people are sitting like completely muted in drafts and whatnot, like I always tell them, like, it doesn't matter, just talk all the time. Like I want people to talk, especially when I ask them something, because like I can't think about everything, even though I pretty much am thinking about everything all the time. So, but there might be that one time where somebody on my team just says, oh, just remember they play a lot of Illidan. And that's perfect. That's all I needed to hear, because maybe I forgot that they actually play a lot of Illidan and it's really scary. So then we can look to ban it, or maybe just pick that Alpha side lane because it doesn't hurt our draft and it sets up so we can actually deal with their Illidan. And that's something that like I think a lot of teams struggle with, where it's like when you have the main drafter, that there's always some people that are just sitting quiet, because they feel that they don't have a good impact on the draft. So they don't want to like disturb you, right? But they can always say something that will change the outcome for the better. And if they say something that I don't like, I'll just ignore it, Like I'm not going to be a douche, right? But like you get what I'm saying, where it's like I want people to talk, and the worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to go with what I want, and not what they said. But then there's going to be moments where somebody just said, oh, just remember Hammer, and then boom, we won the draft because I almost forgot it, but they told me. So
So this kind of brings me to the next point then, because as a drafter, and now that you don't have a lot of time to actually talk with your group, and you need to make a decision really fast, how do you actually deal with if you have teammates that have a very unique hero pool or very limited hero pool? And I guess you would know how do you deal with that actually in a draft situation? Like, what do you do? Like, you want to draft Jaina, but you don't have a Jaina player, then how do you deal with that? Or you
that's the thing where it's like, that's where scrims comes in. Like, you practice everything and you kind of pre-plan stuff, and if there's heroes that other teams are playing and you don't really play very well, but they're working out, they seem to be really strong, then you have to pick them up and you have to try work on that. But that's literally what scrims are for. You play a lot, and there you have time, and you have, like, you're not scared to try out new things, because like, it doesn't matter if you lose the game or not. It just gives you an idea of if it has potential, or like, if it's really good, if it's bad, and so on. And that's where especially, like, I think people should really try to say what they want to say, right? If they want to try some new heroes, or in certain situations somebody thinks X is good here, then you try it, right? Because it's a scrim. The result in the end doesn't matter, and you can only, like, learn from it.
Okay, that's actually a fair point. Cav, we kind of talked about this in our episode with Michael Udall, actually. I don't remember.
It was a shot calling episode.
Yeah. So
we talked about how losing scrims doesn't necessarily matter. It's important that you're just learning and getting better.
Yeah. So that's kind of...
And that applies to draft.
Yeah, fits quite nicely, actually, yeah. So what happens if the opposite actually occurs when you're facing a team that plays unique heroes? How does it affect your drafting, if at all?
It can make it really hard. Like, there was a time... It's very complicated, because, like, there was a time where, like, back in old Fnatic, when we were, like, pretty much screaming Method every single day. And back then, they were famous for playing, like, Abathur, Mediv, and Tassadar. And they would keep playing the same thing all the time, right? So, like, if we banned two of them, they would just pick the third all the time. And that's, like, that makes the drafts very, like, inbred with time, because we learn how to play against them, right? Because we get to play versus pretty much the same composition, like 10 times in a row. And eventually we find the answer, right? And if they're not changing their playstyle, like, it becomes very, like, the drafts just becomes really weird, because, like, other teams won't be drafting this, right? But since they're drafting it every single time, we just have to focus on trying to play versus that. Because if we just try to draft something that it doesn't counter that, we just lose the game. And it's not, like, good practice. And in that sense, it becomes really awkward, because we want to practice, like, all around right, but we're forced to practice versus two playstyles, because that's the only thing they're practicing. So in my opinion, they're practicing bad, because they're just practicing these two playstyles. But I don't know, like, it's really hard. It can also be good, right? Because if there's a meta hero like Mediv, and people actually play it quite a lot, and then you play versus a team like Method, and they play it every game, then you get enough practice versus it that you feel comfortable, like, leaving it open for other teams. So, like, it's both that you become good versus these unique picks if you play versus teams that just spam them, but at the same time, like, if you have an important match versus a team that doesn't even play these heroes, and then you scrim a team that only plays these heroes, then you don't get, like, optimal practice, because you have to only try to counter what they are doing, but they're just doing the same thing all the time.
What about situation that you're gonna go against a team that plays a really off-meta hero? Nothing that really comes to mind at the moment, but you don't have a scrim partner. Murky, for example. That's excellent. So let's say you are gonna be facing a team that's gonna be playing. They are known to play Murky. Now you're looking for a scrim partner, and you actually don't have anyone that plays Murky.
Yeah.
How do you do? How do you prepare for that from a drafting point of view? Do you even prepare for that? That's.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Depending on the hero. If it was Murky, I wouldn't prepare for it, because I don't think Murky will ever be good, and I can just, like, foretell, like, how the game should be played out, or what he will do, and then it should be kind of easy to play around it. But there's heroes like Samuro, which is super hard to deal against. And yeah, if you don't get to practice versus it, so you don't know how to respond against it, then you're probably just gonna auto-lose the game. And in that sense, if you don't get to practice versus it, as you mentioned, because you don't have the scrims, then you probably just ban that hero. But there are situations where the team doesn't only play Samuro, they also play Medivh and Abatur. And that makes it a bit tricky, because then you kind of have to filter out, right? Because if you're not getting enough practice, so you can figure out, like, oh yeah, we can actually deal with the Abatur, but like we're still struggling versus this. Then you leave Abatur open, you ban Medivh, and then you're ready to face the third, right? Or one of the third three. But that's where it gets pretty tricky. If they play a lot of Shiki picks or Shizi picks, and usually in those situations, you either try to filter and deny them their comforts, whilst making sure you don't go out of your comfort. I'm gonna elaborate about this in a second. Or you just don't care. Like you say, we don't know how to deal with your shit, but we're just gonna let you play it because we can't ban everything, and we're just gonna focus on our style and hope that it's enough. But ideally, I think you should. So let's just say they play Abatur, Medivh, and Samuro, and you have really hard time dealing with all of these heroes. What I think you do then is that you ban Samuro, for instance, and then you make a draft with Medivh, or like pick an early Medivh and make sure that you have good drafts with the Medivh. So if they still want to go for the Abatur, then you are fine taking that matchup with the Medivh comp you're going to build into their Abatur. So you literally, you take down 3 birds in 1 stone, or how it's said.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. It kind of brings me to the next question that I would like to have answered. You mentioned scrims. Both you and Cav said scrims is the place to practice at. How does drafting differs between screaming and the actual game that is going to be played in competitive? Like, what's the difference between practicing, the drafting in practice during practice mode, and a live match?
I think I think the main reason is that once you're actually like in the competitive game, you're usually gonna like stick to the standards of what have been working the best for you, your comforts, so to say. Whilst in scrims you can be a bit loose, you know, like we played the Keltas 2 times in that situation and it worked pretty well, and then the next time we try the Gul'dan instead, right? Because we know that the Keltas works, and then the Gul'dan seems pretty bad, then we try the Kel'Thuzad, and then so you try different things, right, to make sure that you try to stay ahead of the curve, or you have many variations of how to approach the game, or just like have these niche picks / replacements in case you get denied. But when it comes down to the competitive drafting, you're gonna have your playstyle, you're gonna want to play the map, and then I mean, you're gonna stick to comforts, because it all comes down to this match. And if you don't feel comfortable playing the Hanzo, even though it felt pretty good, you're probably gonna stick with the Ringer.
So basically, scream, testing, competitive, whatever works for you. Cav, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think it's important to, like, people always use that word comfort, and I think literally what professionals mean when they say comfort hero is a hero that where you can play the hero and you think about the game instead of thinking about playing the hero, right? And so in scrims, a lot of the time you're thinking about playing your hero because you're trying to figure out how do I fit in my hero into this comp, how do I play with my team on this hero. But in terms of like competitive, you want to be able to focus on comms, you want to be able to focus on the minimap, lanes. You don't have to be thinking about how to play your hero. And so for amateur players, you probably don't have very many heroes that are actually comfortable for you at that level. So you guys can, practice. If you're a team amateur team that practices a lot and you scrim a lot, you can slowly increase your hero pool. But when you're setting up yourself for an actual match, you should really try to be on a hero where you can think about the game and not having to think about playing your hero.
Okay, I see. So it kind of brings, kind of emphasizes the difference between when do you actually use screams to experiment with versus when do you use the scream to practice a solid comp you're trying to make work. So that's quite interesting. So this again kind of leads me to the next question then. Generally speaking, between screams and competitive, what kind of teams, Quack, from your experience, did you find the hardest to draft against, and why?
Method for sure. Expert method. I've had many names, especially back when there was only 2 bans. Once we got 3 bans, and they kind of didn't change their approach and just kept, they kept excelling at playing Tassadar, Abathur, Medivh, and they didn't really change it. Like they weren't super good at playing standard, and they didn't find like one or two new like really strong picks. So it was really easy to do to start drafting versus them then, because then you could just ban two of them, deny the third in terms of picking it or just being ready for it. And then you won them on standard, and if they wanted to pull out the one you left open, then you were prepared. But back when there was only 2 bans, it was super hard to play versus it, because they truly excelled at playing these heroes, and you could only like ban one, deny one, if you even wanted to take that approach. But usually, like I personally try to, just be ready for both, and kind of bait them into it. But it was really hard because they were so good at doing it, and it just required a very high like skill cap in terms of game sense, like for the whole team and not only me, to win versus these teams when they were playing these heroes. Because I don't know, it's so hard. Like Abathur, like a good team playing Abathur can be really, really hard. Especially if you don't have a good plan what to do against it, they will just run away with the game. And playing against a good Medivh, it's no.
I completely agree with that. Kava there, I mean, in a sense, what Quack says is that he doesn't like to draft against ADRD, if I understood it correctly.
Medivh is just broken as a hero. That's like the fact, the way Medivh and Abathur warp the game is like greater than any other hero except for maybe Vikings. But even Vikings, I think, are a little bit easier to deal with in a lot of ways.
Trash.
There you go. See, Vikings are just bad. So it is hard, like in the situations, to deal with those heroes. And I mean, Quack said it's bad to. It can be really bad to play one style, right? Which is essentially what they were doing, and they stuck with it. A lot of bottom teams in every region can only play one style. They can only play aggressive, or they can only do this, and it makes them relatively easy to draft against in most cases. And a lot of amateur teams will only have one style. But the versatility that certain picks give you, even if you're only playing one style, if you can execute it, it's just always hard to deal with. And finding a style that like works for your team like that, if you don't have a lot of practice time in your amateur team, can be something that's really good. So that's one of the things to look to. Don't look at, if you're actually wanting to try and emulate a team as an amateur team and you don't have a lot of time, maybe don't look to emulate the teams that draft a lot of things. Maybe look to emulate the teams that actually do well, but on a very small number of comps that they like to run.
Yeah. And kind of to wrap up this first segment, because Quax is a bit of a time limit here, kind of to wrap it up, QuackNiix, from all the experience you've gathered so far drafting in this game, is there anything you'd like to see improved with the drafting? Recently we got the 3rd ban, the timer was shortened. Is there anything you'd like to add? Maybe the 3rd ban was not needed, maybe the time shortening was too much. Is there something you'd like to change in the current drafting system that you think would help the game, or at least the drafting part of the game, be better?
I think it's in a pretty good state right now. Like the only thing I would like to change is not necessarily from Blizzard's end. It's more about like teams from teams, because I think this time around people have a pretty good understanding, like the top 4 teams at least have a pretty good understanding of like a standard meta with their own style to it. But what I would like to see change in drafts in general in competitive play is that lower tier teams, so like ourselves in Roll20 last season, we shouldn't have tried to take on the big guys with standard, even though that's like what I want to do. We should have tried to cheese our way out of these games, because 8 out of 10 times we wouldn't win our match versus Liquid, to say. So by playing them standard, so then we should spend the entire week practicing something cheesy or very niche things to try get an edge on them. But that's something I've never liked to do, and it's pretty much something I've never done, because I think standard beats cheese 8 out of 10 times. And I personally, like, even though I wasn't as successful for the last year, I still believe like I am one of the best shot caller and drafters in the game. Even though I would say this time around, people have caught up. Like there's actually 2 handfuls of people that have good game sense now to compare, or even to be better than I am. But back in the day, there was like 5 people in the world that were actually good at the game.
That's reasonable assessment, I think. Cav, what do you think? I think he's pretty spot on with that.
I mean, I say this all the time on stream. Like the level we've seen from pro play so far is far below the level we could have.
Yep.
You know, pros just make constant small mechanical mistakes on heroes. The rotations are never quite as optimal as they could be. Even just like improving rotations by like 2 or 3 seconds in terms of efficiency has had a dramatic effect on how effective teams are in fights because they get there early. So heroes, if you know the pro scene keeps going and keeps getting better, you're going to be looking at a completely different world in the very near future.
That's what I like that I have seen like the last season. I actually think like the top 4, top 5 teams were actually at the they had a pretty good standard. But like previous season, I think there was 2 teams. I mean, us, Fnatic back then, and Dignitas. We were the only good teams, like in terms of like game sense. You know, like we were the only team at that level, and people weren't catching up. People weren't capitalizing on fog. People were making really bad rotations and so on, and they weren't learning. But like finally, it got to a point where, as I'm saying, like right now, I think it's at a pretty good state because I think like the top 5 teams in Europe is actually at a significant level to each other, and they're pretty strong. They actually know what they're doing nowadays.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense in pretty much any game you're looking at. The beginning is always going to be very, very hard, and really the top minds at the beginning are going to be those that are going to shine. And it's going to take sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years, sometimes 3 years for other people to catch up, because all of a sudden those people who caught up, they had someone to learn from. So it's kind of a always kind of a thing that builds up on top of. So it's QuackNiix, of course, you were one of those from the early days that kind of led up the scene, at least in Europe. And it's I guess it makes a lot of sense that teams finally caught up. They had you to learn from, they had ADRD to learn from, they had a few other top minds that they could learn from, and eventually we have what we have now, and it's amazing for the whole scene. So that's always good. With that being said, we're gonna stop with the first segment of us talking kind of freely here with QuackNiix about drafting, and we'll go to the viewers' questions. So viewers at chat, if you have any questions, now is the time. We also gathered a lot of questions from Discord, both from Heroes Lounge Discord and the Nexus Schoolhouse. Nexus Schoolhouse, if you don't know about that, it's Cavaliers, this side. Cavaliers Discord. It's a very education-oriented place, so if you want to learn a lot about the game, make sure to check it out. It's a fantastic place. And I think we can begin. Quack, prepare yourself. We have a lot of questions.
Yep.
A lot of questions.
Ready.
All right. First question coming from JBeer. Do you rely on yourself during drafts, or teammates can throw ideas which can disturb your thought process? I think we talked about this, and so I'm going to connect it to the next question as well. The next question comes from Hut, in continuation of JBeer's question. If your teammates also come with ideas, in what way do they do it? How do you make sure that it disturbs you the least while they still have the opportunity to come with valuable information? And I like this question because you did talk about this, that you like when your teammates throw you with some information, but how do you actually filter it? How do you make sure that they don't over communicate with you? Because communication or time is something valuable in this game, especially now with the draft being short. You don't have all the world and the time in the world. So how do you optimize this communication?
I mean, as I said earlier, like it was a lot easier before. It was before they like nerfed the draft or made it harder, because you got very limited in time in terms of your time pool. But like back then, I really wanted people to like feed information, or I gave them questions all the time because I wanted people to actually be paying attention, so they could learn from the drafts, and so they could finally, like start to get a grip of why we're doing X, because we've been doing it now for 5 weeks, so they could like fetch me some bones as well. But it got a lot harder, as I mentioned as well, when they changed the draft format. Mm-hmm. And now it's kind of like if somebody has an idea, they say it, right? And then I have to decide fast whether it's relevant or not. And then somebody says, oh, we can pick Keltas here. And then I'm like, I look fast, right? And then I see if it's something I want to do or if it's something I don't want to do. And there's going to for sure be situations where like I choke in those situations. And I just go for what somebody wanted, even though I really don't think it's good. but I don't have time to elaborate and maybe just get caught up in something and I go for it. But there's also gonna be moments where I completely ignore it because I already have my plan. I know what to do because I'm winning this draft or whatever, right? And then somebody says, "Oh, can you pick me Chromie here? I'm gonna win the game." And then I say, "No, pick Falstad here, because this is how we're gonna play the game. We're not gonna team fight. We're gonna play around them. So Chromie is useless here, you know." But then then I have more time to elaborate because no matter what people say, I've filtered it. I'm still gonna make a fast judgment of what they're saying. It's not like I'm 100% tunnel vision on what I want to do, but I hear what they're saying. I see if it's something I want to do or not, and then instantly, no, we're gonna do this, and then I explain why.
All right, so Cav, maybe you have some tips, because again, we did mention, especially with Michael Udall when he was talking about shot calling, that communication is a valuable asset. It's a valuable resource, rather. Is there any tips for communication during draft from you that you can give us?
I mean, the situation QuackNiix is talking about is like purely a result of the shortened timer, and it's just really hard to deal with. Everyone struggles with it. People are struggling with it in scrims more so, even because they're like, "Oh, we wanted to try this. How do we?" Because they haven't thought about it in advance about how they'd want to do a particular kind of draft. And my advice is do that prep beforehand, so that you go into the draft, go into every draft. Like, don't say you're ready until you actually know what your ban is. You're going to think, okay, if they ban this, we're going to ban that, and practice drafting. There's no up-to-date drafting tool, unfortunately. I don't think that works reliably and has 3 bans and has a timer, but you can go into a mock draft with people on your team and practice it so that you get faster. Practice. There's a saying that conference gives you readiness of thought. And if you just do that consistently, instead of only during the game, you're going to get to the point where you have the efficiency to think about those things. But it's very difficult right now. It just is.
It's actually really funny that you mentioned that, because that's something I've been preaching about forever to every team that we're playing scrims versus and whatnot. Because whenever a game is over, the lobby is up 5 seconds later, and people are just spamming messages, go, go, go. If somebody is not in the lobby, if everybody's not in the lobby within 1 minute of time, people are like, hello, go, hello, what are you doing? Come on, let's play. But that's so far from optimal, because I try to tell everybody, every team, that instead of trying to push for 6 games in 3 hours, which is what you can do, I say I try to tell everybody to value 5 games so much more, and actually use 5 minutes after every single game to go through what went wrong, what you should have better, what could you have changed, yada yada yada, right? However you approach, how you improve, and then before you actually jump into the next draft and ready up and start the draft, you should quickly talk, okay, so this is cursed, what do we want to do? Do we want to try anything special? Or we're just going to go with standard? If yes, then I'm going to be banning this, then we'll obviously see what they do. If they ban X, then we ban Y, or, but people don't do it. People don't do it. It's so sad.
I tried to get NA to start doing that when I was coaching GFE, at least for our blocks, and teams didn't want to do it.
Yep. I don't know.
I don't get it.
A shame. Next question comes from Aviator. How do you draw the line between getting what you or your team wants in the draft, but also countering your opponent's draft? So I'm going to expand a bit about this and throw my own question, because we didn't talk about it, and it's actually quite important. When do you draft proactively, and when do you draft reactively?
I mean, you always have to be able to react in a draft, but you should always go in with a plan, and you have your play style, right? So opening a draft, you always pick power picks or meta picks that usually doesn't give away anything, but you are comfortable enough with to go 5 different directions with, and then depending on what they do, you always look to adapt to counter them, because that's how you win the draft, by getting something that wins versus what they just picked, or have a win condition around them or whatever. So just by opening Yrel Malf, you can literally do anything with that everywhere, right? And then all of a sudden, if they pick a Task Tracer, then you spend your next picks countering that. And then if they pick a Diablo Phoenix Thrall, and they've set up to full-on team fight, right? And it's Infernal Shrines. Then I say, no, I don't want a team fight. And I pick the Haka Falstad, you know? So like you always have to be reactive in drafts, unless you have like a cheese or a niche plan that you're just gonna be like, no matter what, we just get our draft and we're gonna do our thing. And it works because we've tried it versus pretty much everything. But I would always say draft proactively in the beginning with a plan, right? And then you always have to react no matter what. But you choose how much you react, right? Like you choose if, oh, they picked that, so we really have to counter it, or maybe, oh, okay, they picked Murky. I don't care. Like I'm just gonna play my style.
We have a Murky main wannabe, and I don't think it's gonna like you saying you don't care about Murky too much.
I mean, until I'm proven wrong, I'm not gonna respect a lot of heroes in this game. And people have tried, so don't get me wrong and say I haven't played versus these things.
All right.
The number, I don't think people appreciate that pros try things in scrims, especially if they have players that are good at a hero, even if it's not the player that's playing it. For instance, Zugrug is actually really good at Murky, so he, Freedom occasionally is like, maybe Murky would be good here. He's not the one playing it, but because he has that experience with the hero, and there may be situations where that hero is good, but it's not like pros don't try things. That's what scrims are for, and they do it 6 hours a day. They have a lot of time to try things.
I am personally one of the people, like, out of drafters in general, I'm probably the one that tries the least. Like, especially when we were winning everything in Fnatic, it seems weird, right? But I didn't actually draft very differently. Like, we pretty much had the same playstyle for 2 years, but it was just because we were so much better than everybody, and we could get away with it because we were always getting the openings that we needed, and then from there on, like, we just changed between, like 10 picks situationally, and we didn't need to do more. So that actually became a problem within the team. It wasn't a problem in terms of result because there was no reason to do anything more because I always had the answer for everything. But then again, right, when you are winning everything, why not try out different things? And that's where kind of I failed a bit back in Fnatic, where I was very stubborn on I just want to do this because I thought we could improve our, like, even if we had played pretty much the same comp 100 times, right, we still weren't doing it flawlessly. And there were still, every game is still new, like there's new situations in every game, and we could improve it drastically because I shouldn't have to like micromanagement the rotations every time. Like it should actually be, since we have played this so many times, people should see, oh, we can just go smart bot wall here now because they're showing 3 people top and so on. But yeah, like if you're winning a lot, I would recommend you to start walking away from your comfort, trying out new things. Yeah, because like versatility.
Yeah.
It makes it harder for the opponent to draft against you because they don't know what's coming. But at the same time, as I said, like I really like to play standard. So if you're not even playing your standard good, I would work on standard. But then again, it comes back to what I said earlier. If your standard is not working either, then you should probably straight up screw standard. We're gonna start practicing Shogal.
All right, you're here first, guys. You're not playing standard. You're playing Shogal. There we go. And I know this is a drafting episode, and we're talking a lot about in-game plays, and we're even touching on some macro points a little bit. But you got to remember that drafting isn't just hero versus hero. It's like hero versus map. And you have to understand how the comp is going to be run on the map in order to understand how you need to draft it. So we have to touch on these other points, at least a little bit, to get a full picture.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, to make it simple, you could just talk about drafts, but then you're not drafting correctly anyways, because...
But then we're not being educational, and this is called educational lounge.
Yeah, like drafting and like game sense just goes hand in hand. Because as mentioned earlier, like, you're gonna, like, if you're a really good drafter or if you have good game sense, you're gonna see how the game is gonna be played out, or how you should play it out, or how they're gonna play out their comp, so you can find how you counter it or how you play around it to find win conditions and whatnot.
No, that's a really good point. So next question coming from from Buster. How much of a consideration of your teammates' hero pool affects your draft? Do you take their most played heroes or favorite into consideration? And how does it affect your team's meta? Again, keep in mind that all those questions are coming from people who play in Heroes Lounge. So this is amateur teams with people who want to become better drafters. And for the most part, they're casual. So
yep.
Some of those questions.
Yeah, I mean, like I haven't ever really thought about it like this. Maybe I do keep it in consideration, but it's not like something I go into and like, oh, I can only draft Hanzo here because our player can only play good Hanzo. Like it's not like that, because for scrims you use the time, as mentioned, to try new things. So like I don't know, maybe I do it sometimes. Like maybe I think, oh, we can only pick these two tanks because I don't feel comfortable with putting my tank on something else because we don't play good with it as a team, or he's not good at it. That for sure might be the case when it comes down to the actual competitive matches, you know, as we might be pretty limited in terms of our success on certain heroes. But in scrims, you try stuff.
That's a good point. And then again, you're just trying to get the comfort pick, and scrims. I guess we're gonna mention this time and time again. Scrim is the place to test, experiment, expand your hero pool. So ultimately, the question for the answer for Buster would be, you need to play with your team's heroes whenever possible, but try to work it out and expand it more during scrims. So pretty straightforward. Next question comes from. I was waiting to read his name. The next question comes from Hyper Mega Ultra Omega God Sloth.
We have a question from chat, by the way. Do you like sloths, QuackNiix? How do you feel about sloth?
Think carefully. That's all I can tell you.
I think they are.
I see what you're doing there.
Pretty
Oh, that's good.
dance game.
Oh my!
I like ducks.
You started good, man. You started good. All right. Anyway, the question he's asking is, how do you react when you have to pick a hero but have little to no time remaining due to still being brainstorming? I guess it comes back to the question is, how do you manage your time efficiently? I guess a short answer would do.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you choke and you don't know what to do, and you end up on something random. Or you just make sure that when it's 5 seconds left, you just dictate the pick, regardless if you guys are still talking or something. Or somebody says something in the heat of storm. Oh, we need to pick. What do I pick? I can pick this. And then you just say, okay, yes. So like, it's really hard to tell because it's situational. But yeah, try to make a simple rule for yourself that like if you guys are talking in the drafts, at the 5 second mark, you need to only focus on locking in your pick.
Okay. Simple enough. Next question comes from KFCXLFT asking, what are the safe first picks on each role for Hero League? So this is a specific question for Hero League. From your point of view, we did talk about safe first picks, power picks, not revealing too much. So if you can elaborate from every role, if you have a few ideas, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So the way you win solo queue, as I'm still trying to learn, is by you don't play the game good, you just fight. So with this being said, you pick heroes that you feel comfortable on and that you know that you can have a good impact on in terms of actually like carrying fights mostly. So I would say for tank, I personally prefer Muradin or ETC just because of their kit. They have a lot of CC. You can roam, you can set up plays for your team, and it's so much easier for your team to. I mean, it's so much easier being a follower than a doer, right? But if you feel comfortable, then you want to be the doer, so you can set up the plays, so your team just have to follow. On ranged, I personally like to play Greyman a lot in terms of carrying, as well as Leeming, because Leeming is just one of those heroes where like you can just pop off and win every single team fight. Whilst with Greyman, it's more focused on the macro aspect, or like you can do everything, right? You can clear waves, you can deny XP, you can put good macro pressure, you can do camps, you can smoke walls when you know the teams tend to be grouping and so on, and you're pretty strong in fights. And then we have support. I mean, it just I don't know, just pick meta supports really, and it's the same like supports with CC, so you can actually set up plays and so on is probably optimal. So, but this time around, most of them have that. So if you're good Deckard, if you're good Malfurion, if you're good Duranded, they're all really strong. We have offlane, I guess, left.
Yep.
So on offlane, it's the same. Let's just pick something that you can have high impact on, and the way you have high impact on solo lane is by dominating your lane and pushing out the wave first, so you can move and try to set up plays 5 versus 4. Because if you push out, the enemy is stuck in the towers, and you can make a rotation. If he wants to follow, he's missing XP, so he won't be following, and then you look for something 5 versus 4. So Irel, the Haka, Maltel in a lot of matchups, I guess. Thrall is okay-ish, but he loses a lot of matchups.
So, Cav, I couldn't but notice that Quack here missed a pretty big hero, in my opinion at least, and I would like to hear your thoughts about that. Diablo was not mentioned as one. Oh,
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, every tank player is like, yeah, I'll play Diablo in HL because I can kill people by myself and I don't need my team.
And
which is not the best attitude. Yeah, and you're like unkillable once you have talents and once you have 100 souls. But honestly, you should be looking at, for Hero League Impact, you should be looking at like your personal win rate on a hero, and you can even go to HOTS logs and like sort by stats to see what's effective in your MMR. Varian is not very good at high ranks. He's not very good if the enemy team has less ping than you, which is actually a massive consideration for the way his kit works. But at low ranks, Varian is like very dominant, whether you're playing him as a tank or as an assassin. So it's going to vary a lot, and you should be trying to play where you are if you just want to win. But if you want to improve, then you should be watching HEC and trying to, mechanically at least play the way that they're playing and play the heroes that they're playing.
I agree. To make it simple, I try to always say that like it's ideally if you main meta heroes because they are meta for a reason, but you should stick to comfort. So like with that being said, start maining meta heroes and then just dominate solo queue with them. So if you're maining Gaslow, consider changing hero.
What if you're maining Murky?
I mean, you're good. I got you, bro. You're good.
All right, someone needs to cut this and send it to Apex. By the way, I was told in chat to inform QuackNiix that you started a riot in Lounge Discord for saying sloths are dance game. Congrats, Quack. It's a feat. Next question comes from Cascon. He's saying, as an ex-pro player and a shot caller / drafter, do you think shot calling and drafting is too much when it comes to the amount of time you had to invest in it? For example, if you're doing call and draft prep, it's harder to expand your hero pool and find the time to play Hero League unless you're living and breathing HOTS, as draft and call prep would take around an additional 6 to 10 hours weekly. That's actually a very, very good question.
I think I'm a living example of that, no? For a very long time, I had a really low hero pool. I mean, it's for the reason that I put a lot of time into doing other things that I thought were more impactful, because at the time I didn't feel I needed to expand my hero pool. But yes, I think it's like that for sure. Then again, it comes down to how much time you actually put in and how much you actually work as a shot caller and drafter, because there's going to be people that don't actually do a lot, and there's going to be people that pretty much do 80% of the work. But regardless, like, you should always try to improve your hero pool and whatnot. So there might be situations where it's more beneficial to try, what is it called, like split the obligations and whatnot, so you don't have to do everything. And maybe somebody should start taking the timer, somebody should time ultimates, somebody should try to call for rotations, just so you can focus more on practicing your new heroes or whatnot. But then again, like, for me, I didn't do that, which might have been a bad thing, but I have always been like 200% in on drafting and shot calling, because I think game sense 1v9s this game.
Yeah, very true. That's actually a really good question and a really good answer. I'm actually glad we got this one. Next one coming from Noznare. In your opinion, what is part of the competitive drafting that amateur players have the worst understanding of? How much time do pro drafters spend trying to theory craft cheese comps? I guess those are two questions from the same player, but actually the first one is very interesting, at least for me to hear the answer on.
Can you say it again?
What is the part of the competitive drafting that amateur players have the worst understanding of? So what are we missing as amateurs that pros know? Macro.
Macro comes down a lot to just wave clear, really. Just wave clear and how you capitalize in-game. because then again, like even though this is a draft question, it's more about game sense, as I've been trying to, or as I am ranting about all the time. But I think people tend to, both teams just pick two good comps. I think actually, okay, so I think the amateur scene, just by looking at the open division, a lot of teams actually have a good understanding of drafting, just because they kind of just copy HSC, which in my opinion is a good thing. But then they also have to understand why you're doing it and how to work with the tools you have, which is where I think they're failing, right? Because they pick these really strong comps and then they just go like this, fight. But if one team has Alex Strasa, Irel Hanzo on Infernal Shrines, then, and you have anything, right? Then you don't necessarily want to go and toe-to-toe with them on first shrine. And you should look to give up first shrine and play macro and make sure that you stay even until you reach 10, because that's when you can actually win fights. But there's no way you're going to win into to Irel Hanzo, Alex Strasa on first shrine, because they're just going to kill the minions. They don't even have to fight you. So like, it depends from game to game, right? But I think, I mean, I don't watch a lot of Open Division, but from what I've seen, it's just like people just fight. And people need to start thinking about macro and how to capitalize on their tools to get small advantages in games just by playing their wave clear, playing rotations. Zero risk if you do it well.
I mean, to a certain degree, this is not only applicable to Open Division. It's actually, we see that in HGC, where teams just copy a draft and they don't really have the understanding of why they draft that certain comp. They just saw it work. They practice a bit. It kind of worked for them. Cav, would you agree with that? I think you would. Yeah. You're muted, Cav. Hold on.
Oh. Testing?
It's working now. Working. Let's go.
Oh, that was weird. People don't draft enough wave clear. Like, as a rule of thumb, you want like 1.5 wave clear heroes minimum in every single draft, and I'm okay with that number being higher. People just don't draft enough wave clears. They don't think of it in the sense that the faster you clear a wave, the more time you have to do other stuff.
Yep.
So if you want to do the other, if you want to fight, you need wave clear first so that you can go fight, because you need to clear the wave first and then fight. You can't do it in the reverse order. That's the thing that people just don't understand. You need a certain amount of wave clear in every draft.
All right.
What you mentioned is really good, because that's the thing. Like, I am so bad at generalizing these kinds of things. But what you said, like having like 1.5 or maybe 2 wave clear heroes, that's what you should have every game, because it just gives so many openings in the game. When you push out the wave first, you disappear from the map if you play good, because you stay in fog where they don't have vision. And while they're stuck in the towers, because you pushed out first, you can do your camp, and they can't do their camp, or you can invade their camp because you're 4 versus 3, and so on. And it just leaves you like tremendous opportunities and rotational advantage, which means you are reactive and you're controlling the game. So when people don't draft wave clear, you draft wave clear, you outclear them, and then you play with positional and man advantage all the time.
All right. And the second question, by the way, from Naznari, let's finish him, is how much time do you spend as a pro drafter analyzing or theory crafting cheese comps, specifically for cheese comps? Apparently, I guess he's very interested in that.
Me personally, pretty much zero. Like I've been talking about it as well, right? Like, I don't like cheese. I don't think cheese wins more than that one game. But then again, right? Like, if you only need to win that one game, then it might be super worth just spamming cheese. Or if you're the worst team going up against a really strong team, then you should probably play cheese. But me personally, I don't like it. I don't cheese.
All right, fair enough. Next question comes from Draconi, asking, how different do drafts look depending on scrim partner? Of course, before specific big games, you want to hide things, but also in general, how much do they vary?
It varies to a certain extent, because there's always going to be the standard, right? The standard meta that pretty much everybody plays. But then there's always these niche. Every team has a niche approach, pretty much, where it's like, Dignitas right now, they're super strong at macro. They're really good at drafting, and that's the thing. Like, if you draft team fight, they're just gonna see that in the draft, and then they're just gonna say, okay, so we pick Junkrat the Hack and we just play around you. We don't team fight, and we're eventually gonna out rotate you, get that one rotation that gives us a lead, and then we have Method, right? That just plays their Abatur Medivh Tassadar. So, like, with this being said, like, every team has a different approach to the game, as well as there actually being a global like meta standard, but you have to adapt versus every team. Leftovers plays a shit ton of Tracer and Maiev, So when you play versus them, you have to be really scared of that or keep that in consideration because that's their strongest things.
Makes sense. We have a question from live chat right now. How do you notice, coming from Squeaky Week, how do you notice what you're doing wrong in draft? It feels like sometimes tunnel vision occurs and the blame comes down to mechanical mistakes rather than drafting mistakes. So in other words, how do you differentiate when draft is at fault for your loss or whatever versus actual gameplay?
I mean, this is a super common thing in competitive play as well, because obviously everybody sees at the game differently. So whilst I'm drafting something and I think the game should be played out in a certain way, maybe it's not, and we lose the game, and then somebody just says, "Oh, but this draft is bad. Like we can't do anything." And then from my aspect, it's pretty simple in those situations, because if we haven't played the game according to my game plan, and as I'm explaining before the game how we should approach it, and in the game calling how we should be playing it, if we're not doing that and then we lose the game, we can't blame it on the draft. However, if we are doing it and we're losing the game, then sure, it might just be on draft.
Okay. Cav, we kind of talked about this too on our episode with Michael Udall, I believe, about analyzing your mistakes post game. Actually, maybe you can recap quickly what he said then.
I mean, that explanation was just triggering for me a little bit because, yeah, because it does happen in competitive all the time. People are like, "Oh, this draft's awful. You didn't play it right." No, it's awful. You literally, we had a game plan at the start of the game that we didn't adhere to at all. We weren't in the right lanes. We didn't do the right timings. And that's how you distinguish the difference in my mind. If you have a draft, you should have a plan for how you want that draft to run the map before you ever get into the game. You can, teams might be upset with you with this, but if you don't have it like in your mind already, you should pause the game at the start and be like, "This is our plan." And then afterwards, if you lost, you should go back and watch the replay and see how closely what you said the plan was matched up to what you actually did. If what you actually didn't match up to the way you articulated the plan, then it's not the draft. The draft could be bad, but it's not necessarily the draft that's the problem. It's that you're not actually doing your plans. You have more fundamental issues as a team. And from my experience with amateur teams, coaching them, they start losing, everyone blames the draft. Like it's the go-to thing to blame, and it's usually not the draft.
But that's what I said, no?
Yeah, it is.
But
it was just triggering. It's just so frustrating.
In a good way.
Because you didn't agree with what I said.
No, I agree with you.
Oh, okay.
And I had this problem. I've had this problem for every team I've ever coached.
Okay.
Professional level, amateur level, it doesn't matter. It's very frustrating.
Yep.
All right. Next question comes from Fallop asking, how when do you decide to draft specific strat instead of just going with meta comfort? For example, the Shad Samuro versus Holy Bananas. Not sure if you saw that one, Quack. Well, maybe you probably did.
What do you mean? I was in the game. I drafted that, bro.
Can I stop the stream now?
It's okay. I will play along. Yeah.
I was so like just brain reading the question. Okay.
It's okay. I think I remember the game. Yeah, I saw it somewhere.
You sure you saw it?
Yeah, I think I saw it.
Please play Samuro. He's pretty good at it.
Yeah, there was this legendary support out of nowhere as well, Pilmannen. It was good. It was a good game. So the question was?
Okay. The questions, are these often last resorts or all or nothing type of situations? Oh man, I want to bury myself somewhere.
Wait, what? What does that mean?
Are these often last? So when you have a comp like that, is drafting, like role swapping, is it a last resort and you pick it out in an all or nothing situation, or is it just you've practiced it so you're gonna pick?
I mean, in this situation, it was like you ideally want to, like, if I'm the flex, right, I ideally want to play the Samuro in that situation. But with the limited time we have, I'm Shad who plays Samuro in solo queue for fun, and he's really good at it. Like, obviously, he's just gonna do a better job short term at playing it, and the hero is completely broken. So we figured it's gonna be a good draft, and they won't see it coming because they know nobody of like me and Chris or Sarm plays it, right? So there's no way they're gonna see it coming. And just by picking like even if I pick with the crown, like even if I pick the support, it doesn't mean anything because you can swap and whatnot. But I felt more comfortable picking up Malfurion and Tyrande, so we could execute this draft style. But if you have unlimited time, then yeah, like you should at least give the right player like the time to try get good at it. But then, I mean, if the support player is still 10 times better at Yrel and your side laner is fine playing Malfurion, then you can swap. But you don't see that too often. And what we did was a like kind of last resort thing, where it's like, yeah, I don't have time to do it. The hero is completely busted. It might just give us a free win, and then like they will start banning it because they have to respect this draft now. And that's exactly what's happened, except for the fact that they banned it before we even played it because somebody revealed our drafts to them, which was a shame. But in the end, we managed to win somehow. So,
for the record, everyone who loves Shad and knows what Shad did back in the day on Vikings was super pissed that we did not.
Is there anyone who doesn't like Shad?
In a competitive, no, it's not. We didn't get to see Shad Samuro in a competitive game.
Yeah.
Because like seeing Shad Samuro when he used to be such an amazing Vikings player and he had that same level of like microing multiple things at the same time would have been so amazing. I was very upset, and everyone I know was equally upset. So,
all right, next question comes from Gadam. How would you approach drafting in a newly formed team lacking synergy?
I mean, well, first of all, you stick to comforts just to make it easier for you guys to work the comps together and to work on communication so you get better synergy. But in terms of drafting, like draft as a group in the beginning. Make sure to talk a lot. Like since the time pool is very limited and you don't usually have time to have discussions about picks, then yeah, talk before games. Talk about your hero pools. Make sure that everybody's on the same page and give suggestions. Don't be scared to try things because yeah, you should just try to come up with what style that works for you guys and like just try to build trust and synergy.
Okay. Pretty straightforward. Next question. Oh, Cav, you need to help me. How do I pronounce this name?
His name's Kenny.
No. You need to pronounce the actual alias here. Lios.
I call him Kenny because I know him personally. His name is Kenny.
Dude. Okay, you need to pronounce it then. Someone. Lios Palder? Lios Palder?
I think that's right.
I don't know. I probably butchered that name, but whatever. How many heroes... Okay, that's a troll question, I see. How many heroes... Or not a troll question. How many heroes does a Falstad have an amazing Gust combo with? Surely you know this one the best.
Like, it's literally unlimited potential with the hero because... Like, with the ultimate, like, you can combo in the sense that... Like you can combo in so many different ways, like because I don't know what you exactly mean with comboing, but just I can just give you a few. Like you can combo in the sense that you gust away the enemy team and then you blow up the enemy frontline, and all you need for that is a lot of damage and CC. So that's a combo, I guess. And just big AoE, big combo. You gust 5 people into a wall. Your Jaina follows out with ring. It's a bit harder. But you can do those combos as well, where you literally just gust people into a wall, a random wall, Cursed Hollow, random wall, and then like your ETC power slides at them, 5-man mosh pit, no biggie. So like everything with like a big AoE, you can combo with Falstad. Just like you can gust them into a wall, into your team. So like Malfurion Silence, this is one of the best in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Because it leaves, it gives you multiple usage. Like as I mentioned right now, that you can combo in very different ways to set up with your gust. You can combo both in the sense that you can gust the enemy team from behind into your team, and you just Malf Silence, and it's just GG. You can also try to isolate people, meaning you gust away as many as possible while you CC one-shot their front line. But like, yeah, like, I don't know, in my opinion, it's like literally unlimited potential, but obviously some heroes have better synergy because the most common ways to combo is by either gusting them into you or gusting people away to isolate and blow somebody up with the time you got.
All right, fair enough. Next question comes from Park555. Now, most of his questions were already answered, so Park, apologies, I'm gonna cut some of your questions out of here. But let's answer those that were not answered yet. How much do you prioritize comps that are easier to play versus comps that are better on paper but have a lot more room to screw up? That's actually an interesting one.
So this again is probably something I failed in my time in Roll20, where like I came from Fnatic. We were one of the best teams in the world. So I came with a very high standard, and I try to play what I would say is optimal.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, some of these comms with like blowing up frontline is super easy, right? But if we're not on the same page and we use all our abilities, but we don't kill the guy, we're gonna lose the fights, for instance, because we committed everything. If we don't get the kill and reset, then we're gonna die. Or if we want to play full macro, it requires us to be kind of on the same page or to be fast in reacting and whatnot. So I think I failed in this department where I stuck for too long in trying to play the game, like trying to play the game how I wanted it to be, because I think that's the optimal way, right? But what I probably should have done is focus more on team fight and making sure that everybody, like we are on the same page and we can rely more on micro and building synergy that way.
Okay.
So I don't know, like you will have to find the balance yourself, what works for you, but you should keep everybody's opinions in consideration. And that's where I kind of failed, as I just mentioned, because I wanted to play my game because I know it's free if done correctly, but it also requires a lot more than if you just draft Diablo Phoenix Thrall, because you literally just press R and you win. But you see the difference, right? Like playing like a comp like that, you literally, like everybody just press their button and it's free in fights. Or you play full macro with the Haka Falstad. It requires a lot of micromanagement and for everybody to have really good understanding and being creative and yeah, yada yada yada.
All right, reasonable. But we have about 10 minutes left, Quack, so let's try to rush through the questions. So quick answers from you. I mean, it's up to you, man. It's your time, not mine. I can stay here for another 3 hours. So let's continue. Do you miss the old draft timers?
Oh, fast answer. Maybe. I don't know. No, I think this is better for the game.
All right, reasonable. Yeah, it's fair. What do you do when your draft gets dismantled?
Like
destroyed. When your opponent just destroys your own draft, what do you do in that case?
Bro, I never get destroyed.
Oh,
no. Okay, so then you're gonna have to figure out fast a new win condition, because if you drafted kind of like team fight and then they just have a stronger team fight comp, then yeah, you kind of destroyed. And then you have to figure out what you can do. Like you have to see your win conditions and you have to figure them out fast and try to do that.
All right. Next questions coming from Cascon. Again, Cascon, I'm going to skip some of your questions. So what happens actually when you draft against a team that is very known for certain heroes? For example, Medivh and Abathur from Method. Do you actually ban those, or do you let them pick them so you can actually get to scream against those heroes?
So specifically with Method is what I said, where it's like it got very one-dimensional screaming versus them because they didn't try to play anything else. So it's really good to play versus a team that like 2-tricks a style with like the Abathur or the Medivh, because then you get very comfortable playing against it because they are the best at doing it, right? So when somebody else whips it out, if you can deal with Method's Medivh, you can probably deal with their Medivh. But at the same time, if they're gonna pick the Medivh 10 out of 10 times, then your practice is not optimal, because then you go up against your next three opponents and they don't even play Medivh, you know. Mm-hmm. But you are only forced to play versus Medivh. So I mean, it's we talked about this earlier as well, but it can be both good and bad for that sense.
All right. Next question asks, kind of in continuation, what do you do if you're about to play against a certain team? Do you actually get to scream against them too? Like, are you trying to scream against them, or are you like trying to avoid them for the next, I don't know, 2 weeks until your match against them?
The way everybody does it is like if I'm in the HCC and I'm playing Dignitas next week, we're not gonna be streaming Dignitas that week, and that's pretty much how every team does it as far as I know. So the opponent you're gonna face next week, you don't play them that week in scrims.
Okay, Freedom has a 2-week policy, but pretty much every HCC team is 1 week. There's just like a very few exceptions that are 2.
All right. Next question comes from Masterfish. What's the weirdest comp that worked in Scream but you never showed in public? Ooh.
I mean, that's a really hard question, really.
Didn't you guys try Asmo as a counter to Ariel once, like old Asmo?
Oh yeah, but we did show it and it worked and it was really strong.
Okay, you did play once. That's true.
We did play it on Cursed Hollow. Where Ariel came out. She was hype. People were playing her. I said she was shit because you can just outrange the hero and she has literally 0 heals. And we did it and we stomped them because we were playing Liming, Asmo, and Thrall. And we never gave them energy. Like throw one Asmo ball and they had to use their heal, and then they don't have anything to hit, so they don't have any energy because we just play from range.
Okay.
But that wasn't the answer to the question, which I forgot what it was.
What's the weirdest comp that worked in scrims, but you never got to play in a real game?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Probably something murky related. Oh, actually, no. It's something we call the condom comp. Excuse my... where it's literally all about enabling one dude with shielding. I don't think we've ever played this in competitive, but in Fnatic we played this in scrims and it was actually pretty successful. Where we, on Towers of Doom, we would pick Soria, Tassadar... Soria was like, there was Breeze. He was the dude, you know. And then we had Mediv, we had Tassadar, we had a support. I think it was Bloodlust Rhaegar. And then a ranged. And we literally, like, Breeze just went in and we just shield.
Hyper
so
Zarya.
Protecting. I mean, you can call it hyper carry, but my word is better, but okay.
Okay, this is true. Okay, Condom Zarya. There you go.
In this case, that comp was actually very similar to that was actually played by Ballistics at 2016 GCWC.
But that was our comp.
Unlucky.
Right, I think, or was it their comp? I think it was our comp.
I don't know who thought it up. I just know that it was played in 2016.
Well, that's what I said. I don't know if we played it, but I think it was played. But now that you're mentioning it, I don't know if we actually created the comp or if they were the ones starting it.
All right. Someone told this to Ruini, by the way. I don't know if he's watching. I know he watched before, but Ruini is a Zarya main known in the lounge, so I think he'll be glad about it. By the way, we have a question from chat from, again, Squeaky Week, asking, how do you deal when your wombo combo draft is ruined? So, for example, an important combo piece is getting banned.
So if you set up comps that are very like, yeah, you want this one together with this one and this one, you should always look at replacements. So let's just say you want to play wombo combo with Jaina, Seratul, etc. That's your wombo combo per se. Then you need to know that, like, after you have showed this comp or whenever, or maybe they're smart enough to figure it out during the draft, if they just ban the Jaina, right, then your combo is ruined. Then you need to have a replacement in mind. So focus on playing the actual draft with the Jaina, Seratul, etc. But when you feel comfortable on it and you know it's working, then you start replacing the Jaina, you start replacing the etc. Just to make sure that if for some reason they ban it or pick it, then you still go with the Gul'dan. It's a bad example maybe, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Maybe Junkrat for Riptire. So you have a look for a burst heroic that you can combo with.
All right. So make sure you have backup. Seems pretty simple. Next question comes from Blue Laguna asking, how many hours a week do you dedicate purely to drafting? That's actually an interesting one.
I mean, I don't actually sit a lot outside of scrims doing that, but before events and in boot camps and so on, then we tend to sit down and talk, and sometimes it's also something I wanted to like implement, that like weekly, just instead of scrimming on Mondays maybe 2 blocks, then you can use 1 block for actually just talking, like, is there anything we want to start playing, like, can we change our drafting approach, yada yada yada, right? So I don't think a lot of teams actually do it, but I think people should do it. Just theory craft or maybe mock draft, as Cav was saying. And back in the days, I was doing it quite a bit with Wooby for a while, especially before events. But I don't know, it kind of has like dimmed down over the years.
Okay. Next question comes from Kana. Again, we need to hurry up a bit. 5 minutes left.
I mean, we can, yeah.
We can. Okay. So next. All right. Next question comes from Kana. How does the team decide who will play new heroes that don't really have an obvious fit? For example, Maiev or Mephisto. That's interesting. Not quite draft related, but I guess, you know, as QuackNiix in your position.
It can be draft related because depending on how the hero is played out, you might want to put a certain guy on it. Because if you obviously want to you're gonna play it on side lane, then you put it on your side laner.
Okay.
If you so like in Roll20, I always wanted to be the guy that was kind of controlling mid, so I could set up the rotations earlier rather than being the guy who's usually hard stuck on side lane.
Okay.
Therefore, like Chris usually playing the Junkrat Hanzo, and he just sits bot lane and clears wave pretty much, whilst I can look to push out mid and set up rotations and whatnot, because it makes it easier for me if I can have the camera at the place I want to do stuff. But I mean, I think whenever there's a new hero, if there's more than one that can actually play the hero, like Mephisto, right, on ranged, like usually there's always going to be two guys that can play the hero, then you both play the hero, and then depending on what types of compositions you have, then one of the others is going to play it. So if we play Hanzo Mephisto, I'm going to play the Mephisto because Chris is a really good Hanzo.
Okay.
But if we play Greymane Mephisto, then if I have a way better Greymane, right, then that's the one who controls the rotations and whatnot, then I play the Greymane and he plays the Mephisto.
Okay, fair enough. Next question is actually just an interesting one because I feel like, you know, in the past we kind of missed it here in Europe, so I'll just ask the question and expand a little bit about it. When a new hero is released, how do you deal with bans picks during scrims and regular season game? And the reason why I'm saying it was kind of a miss in Europe, at least, is because I still remember the traumatic time when Maiev was released, and it seems like, at least in Europe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cav and Quack, but it feels like at least in Europe, Maiev was kind of underestimated, and NA and Korea kind of punished EU harshly with Maiev.
Overall, like whenever there's new heroes, like they're not allowed in HCC for the 2 first weeks, right? So
Yeah.
people don't spend a lot of time with it in the beginning. But when you're actually starting to scrim those heroes, then I think it's like an unwritten rule that people actually leave the hero open in general, just so everybody can pick it, because then when they pick it, you get to play against it and try to figure out what you want to do, and when you're picking it, you see what they do against it, you know, how they try to counter it and what works and what not. So I would say, just for like people that are smart, would just leave it open, like in the beginning, like everybody would leave it open just to get the optimal practice.
All right, fair enough. Next question comes from Dastan, and this is, I guess, those are going to be falling not under drafting, but again, is your position as shot caller, and it could work out. Asking, do you have a small talk or speech with your teammates to embottle them before a series? Do you inspire them, in other words? Do you have like some kind of motivational speech, talk? You know, does it happen?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, kinda. It depends a bit. Like, I mean, you gotta be a people feeler as well, in the sense that, like, if they just think it's really cringe and they're not listening to you, then obviously, like, it doesn't have an impact. But some people like really get hyped from that kinds of things, and if they do, then there's no reason to not give a speech. But then again, like, it's not necessarily my job. Anyone can do it.
Okay. So is there anything, like, in general that you've been doing or someone in your team been doing to kind of keep the morale up for the team?
I always try to hype everybody up and just like make sure that if people are feeling confident, we know what to do, and you know, like, so like if we just go in here today and we do our thing, we get our drafts and we play confident, we make sure that we are reactive, we're gonna stomp these shitters, you know, like try to get everybody like on the same page, and yeah, like throwing something cheesy to make people relax a little bit and get hyped.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Cav, from your experience in GFE, do you guys have something like that, or?
I was never good at this. Like, straight up, I am not the guy that'll get you hyped. I'm the guy that can like help you get better if you want to get better, but it's an important people skill. I don't possess it, unfortunately.
Okay, fair enough, man. Fair enough.
I know my limit.
Okay. Next question comes from John Knight, and this is also the last one. So we are coming to an end here. What do you think teams should be discussing after the draft ends? So basically, what teams should be talking about after the draft ends, before the game actually starts, in those 1 minute period?
You should make it clear. Well, it depends, as you said, like how much time you actually have, but you should make it pretty clear that everybody's on the same page regarding lane setup, how you want to approach early game, maybe the first objective. Obviously, like, it might change because you still have to adapt regarding what happens in the game, and then touch on power spikes and team fight post end probably.
All right. Cav, do you have any advice for teams what to do during the first minute of the game, as the game loads and until the gates open?
So this is just something that gets really complicated, because for amateur teams, sometimes you have to like go into a lot of detail about, we need to be using Blizzard on the wave so that we can set up this rotation, and this person needs to be doing the camp. Whereas once you get to a certain point, you can just be like, we're running 1-3-1. Urel Phoenix are our anchors, so which means they're going to be on the side lanes, like making sure that soak happens. And you can like discuss how you want to play them. Like, you don't have to go into a whole lot of depth about how you need to play the map, because if it's a comp you practice, or even comp you haven't practiced, like the basic ideas are already there. So it can be a big struggle if you're teaching someone who is like maybe new to competitive, which is a big issue, because every season there's new people who have never played competitive in Heroes Lounge before. And it's just be patient.
All right.
The best advice I got, just be patient. It's going to take a while.
All right, we actually have one last question in chat, and we're gonna call it off for tonight. Cascon is asking, how important is mock drafting? And he even challenged you, Quacks, to a mock drafting, if you will.
Okay, right now?
Probably not right now, because I know you're busy, but in general,
Fight me,
bro. There you go, Cascon, fight me, bro.
Sure, we can mock draft sometime. Just tune into my stream. Hit that subscribe button. No, but like, as we touched on this as well, like I don't personally mock draft a lot. We used to mock draft a bit and just theory craft going into events in boot camps and whatnot. But if you do it, if you have the time, if you have the energy, then like it can't hurt, right? Like, it can probably only make you better. So I don't see any reason to not do it.
Ah, fantastic.
If you guys do want to mock draft, both the Nexus Schoolhouse and the Heroes Lounge have a channel specifically dedicated to mock drafting.
That's cool.
At least on the Nexus Schoolhouse one, there's always people in there mock drafting. Like, the Park is there 24/7. I think he's done more than 200 drafts in the mock drafts channel in the last 3 months.
The lounge one is also pretty active, by the way, for the record. And both of them, I think, have the bot, right?
Yeah, they do. They both have a bot that links to a drafting website that works some of the time.
Yeah. Fantastic, great. This is it for tonight, ladies, gentlemen, sloths, and other animals. Well, ducks, I suppose. Quacks, it's been an amazing experience to have you here. I'm so glad you accepted the invitation. You were our first EU guest, and I'm really happy about this, and also the first live stream we've done with a special guest. So thank you for that. Quacks, is there anything you want to say to the viewers before we log off?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always fun. I really like to talk about these kinds of stuff. I guess I'm allowed to shout myself out.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, if you're looking for more educational content, then you can check out my stream as well at twitch.tv/QuackNiix, as I try to keep educational as a main focus.
All right.
And thanks to
while he isn't here really, because his team doesn't know when to back.
Where's the monster shout out, man? Come on, bro.
I mean, I'm not in Fnatic anymore, right? So
right,
there's no obligation of doing that. So
if anyone from Monster is watching, I will totally sell out if you just give me some more of these. They're like right here.
So nowadays I'm drinking Nocco.
Nocco, okay.
It's a Swedish brand, but it's starting to get everywhere in the world. So after I'm starting to sell it out, you're gonna see it where you live and you live.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much, Cav. Is there anything you want to say to the viewers?
Go watch HGC, because finally it's back. It's been so long since we've gotten to see some competitive games. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this drafting episode. Drafting is just really complicated, so we've done 2 episodes on it. We could probably talk about drafting for another like 48 hours straight, honestly, you know, if we didn't fall asleep. Drafting in Heroes is just very hard, and there's lots of stuff you need to know. So hopefully we're giving you some insight, and we can give you more insight as the educational round goes on.
All right. And with that being said, ladies, Sloss, and everyone else, I hope you had a good night, and I'll see you guys next time.